Closed captioning of this program is made possible by the Fireman's Fund Foundation.
Mad cow disease surfaces for the first time in California. The USDA says the food chain is safe, but continues to investigate whether other animals are afflicted. California prison officials announce a massive system-wide overhaul. Tangled traffic expected for those trying to cross the Golden Gate Bridge this weekend. San Francisco's Doyle Drive will be demolished, making way for the new phase of the new Presidio Parkway. And is technology manufacturing in China wreaking havoc on the environment? We'll hear from Goldman Environmental Prize winner Ma Jun. Coming up next. Hello, I'm Belva Davis, and welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me on our news panel this evening, Michael Cabanatan, San Francisco Chronicle transportation reporter, and Michael Montgomery, reporter for the Center for Investigative Reporting and KQED News, and Paul Rogers, San Jose Mercury News environment writer. Paul, a rare form of mad cow disease spotted in California. How concerned should we be?
Well, statistically, not very concerned. Nobody has ever died in the United States from mad cow disease connected with U.S. beef. As we remember from the 80s and 90s, there was a very bad outbreak in England. About 150 people died then. There have been a lot of safety processes put in place since. But, you know, food safety is a very serious thing. A lot of people forget that according to the CDC, 3,000 people in America, 3,000 die every year from foodborne illness. And these are things like salmonella, E. coli, other types of bacteria and infections. I mean, just last week, Dole recalled hundreds of crates of lettuce because of a salmonella scare. A year ago, 30 people died from cantaloupes with listeria coming out of Colorado. Some of us remember the spinach scare here 5 years ago from San Benito County. So food safety is a very serious thing. The thing about this mad cow incident, which happened on a dairy cow that wasn't going into the food supply. And remember, you can't get it from milk either. The concern is that some dairy cows, when they get old, are slaughtered for human meat consumption. They go and become hamburger. And so the USDA is investigating the dairy farm in Tulare County where this cow came from to see if other cattle might have it, to see if any of those cattle previously have gone into the food supply. And consumer groups say that this is exposing some loopholes and some weaknesses in the U.S. safety system.
And there's a battle on for the dollar to do a better job. Is that what they're saying, that they're going to need more money in order to be able to assure that we're safe?
Well, you know, there were some reforms put in place after 2003 when the first case was discovered in the United States. This is only the fourth time ever in the U.S. that we've had a case, and certainly the first in California. But, you know, the beef industry, frankly, has killed a lot of the attempts at reform, and there are stricter rules in other countries. So one of the things that has come up this week is only 1 in 1,000 cows in America are tested for mad cow disease. In Japan and Europe, it's most of the cows. You know, the cow has to be dead when you test it. It costs, I don't know, $20, $30 for each cow. So when you start talking about tens of millions of animals, that's a lot of money. And then the question would be, who pays? USDA and the industry say, look, there's never been anybody die. This is incredibly rare. Our practices are working. And consumer groups are saying, no, we don't know if we're not testing other animals. You know, is this the only one out of the 34 million cows slaughtered a year, the only one that we just randomly got lucky and tested and found it in?
Well, Paul, so you got that to that point in your piece, one of your stories earlier this week. You quoted one state ag official who's saying the system's working. This proves the system's working. And yet, it was a lucky catch because what's the numbers? 40,000 are tested
out
in
of
the
34 million.
So
1 in 1,000.
So, and you have consumer groups saying, wait a minute, what does this say?
It's a great debate. I mean, the debate is, were we lucky with this one that we randomly tested, or does it show that the system works? And the USDA points out, these mathematically, right after the 2003 case, we increased tenfold the number of cattle in America that we test every year. It went from 40,000 to 400. And we did that for a couple of years and only found 2 cases. Now, I think you can make a pretty good argument that when 3,000 people a year are dying from E. coli and salmonella and other diseases, and we haven't had one yet die from mad cow, that people ought to get too worried and too worked up about it. But I also think that one of the main shortcomings this has exposed is that unlike most other large beef exporting countries like Canada, for example, Argentina, other countries, the United States does not have a system where we can track cattle from the time they are born to the supermarket. And what that means is that when there's a problem like mad cow or when there's a E. coli outbreak, it's very difficult to quickly track back where that animal came from. And the reason we don't have that tough standard to find the farm and quarantine it and make sure no other cows come from it is that the beef industry has fought it. They say it's federal intrusion, it's cumbersome, the tags cost $2 or $3 each, they'd rather brand the animals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some people think it's that they're trying to avoid the taxes of not having the federal government know exactly how many animals they have. Be that as it may, the Obama administration is putting a new rule in place this year for the first time to require tracking, but it's only if the animal crosses state lines. So consumer groups say, all the other countries, big countries, do it for every animal. Why can't we?
Is there any indication that this is a larger or more widespread problem in California?
I don't think we know yet. You've got all these guys right now from USDA who are crawling all over this still secret dairy farm in Tulare County. They're not saying where it is. And they're going to be doing things like testing to see and checking every bit of paper, checking to see, was any animal sick? Are they displaying any of the signs of mad cow? And if they find one other animal that looks like it has this, I would say they will probably kill every cow on that farm. It could be tens of thousands, because this is California's big dairy area. At the same time, we need to remember this is a very unusual strain of this disease, which doesn't come from eating infected feed, meaning feed made from other cattle parts, which is illegal, but occasionally can slip into the food. Some scientists think this just happens spontaneously, where the proteins in the brain behave strangely and they cause a disease. So we don't know a lot yet, but as for now, it's only the one cow.
Okay, so we know the one cow, we know they're still testing, and you're saying that this was a very unusual and a rare event.
I had a hamburger for dinner tonight, but if we learn too much more, I might be having the tofu burger next week.
Well, Michael, I'm going to return to you. You are here to talk to us about one event that's taken many, many years of talk and discussion, and that is a real change in the way we handle the criminal justice system, in particular prisons. So tell us about the prison overhaul and what it's going to mean to all of us.
Right. So we had the corrections officials this week announcing a pretty major strategic plan moving forward to continue to reduce the inmate population, to bring the budget down significantly. Just to throw out a number, the CDCR's current budget is $10 billion. I got to read this because it went from 3% of the general fund to 11% of the general fund in 30 years. This plan would bring that down to about 7.5%. Now, the thing is, we've heard plans like this before. There was a plan 5 years ago that looked great on paper, put together by smart people, well-intentioned academics and others. It didn't go anywhere. It ran into reality with fiscal problems and what have you. The difference today is there's some momentum. We've got realignment that started in October. It's already brought down the prison population by about 22,000 inmates. That in and of itself is making all sorts of things possible within the prison system that weren't possible before. So this plan is essentially going to try to ride on the coattails of realignment.
Well, explain realignment, number one, which is the key here to
and this is the governor's one of his big initiatives. The realignment essentially shifts the responsibility for certain inmates, certain felons from the state to the county, both for parole and if they commit another crime, a low-level crime. And so because we've had that shifting or diverting of felons from the state to the counties, this is why we're seeing such a drastic drop in the inmate population. They call it the churn rate. These are people who go into the prison system maybe for 2 weeks, 2 months, and they're out again, and they're in again, and they're out again. So they're trying to sort of slow that revolving door. One of the concerns is the system, is the state system, sort of passing on its problems to the counties. Are we going to see overcrowded county jails instead of overcrowded state prisons? That's one of the worries. The other worry is, will there be the money, the continuing money to fund a lot of this?
We've been doing realignment for 6 or 7 months now. What is the answer? What are we seeing? I mean, is the crime rate going up? Are the county prisons getting overcrowded? What's happening so far?
Well, the big headline is we are seeing a significant reduction in the population at the state level. So it's working in that sense. I've talked to different folks in different counties. Not surprisingly, it's playing out unevenly. You've got counties like San Francisco that are really kind of prepared for this. Other counties that aren't. You've got some counties that have population caps on their jails, and they've been having to make decisions on early releasing some people convicted or awaiting trial. So it's playing out unevenly. There haven't been any horror stories yet. And again, the idea is that this applies only to people whose most recent offense is non-violent, non-sex related.
There was really quite a dust-up down in Los Angeles, though, about this, where real strong objections to having this take place.
Well, there's concerns, of course, about the LA jail system. I mean, there's been big problems there, and it's not the only one in the state. So it's part of this question of, can counties handle this responsibility, and will the state have the money to continue to fund it?
Now, how well thought out is this, given that it's been discussed for years? Is this a well-considered plan, or is this, sort of your typical Sacramento pass the budget, cut the budget shuffle?
I talked to a lot of people about that this week in Sacramento. I think generally it's getting good marks. It's aggregating things, ideas that have been around and things that have actually been in place. So a lot of these things aren't completely new. But one thing they're doing is they're taking some of their liabilities and turning them into assets. Here's an example. The state's classification system was shown to be overclassifying inmates. That is, they were putting them in high security units when maybe they didn't need to be in those. Under this plan, they will move a lot of those inmates into lower security facilities because they're not considered a big risk. That will save lots of money. There's all sorts of other ways they're finding cost savings, if you will. Okay,
there are two issues that will be on the ballot this November, just qualified. Those should save money. Explain that.
Well, and this goes to, this really isn't just about realignment. It's about fundamental changes in our criminal justice system. The first ballot initiative would abolish capital punishment, and that's costing, estimates are about $184 million a year. There's 720 people on death row. There's only been 13 executions in 34 years. Some of the money saved will supposedly go to help solve homicide and rape cases. That's at least what the ballot initiative supporters are saying. The other is 3 strikes. There's a initiative that's the supporters say is qualified that will change 3 strikes and arguably reduce some of its sentencing structures.
And 3 strikes was a sentencing structure that made it very difficult for anybody to ever be paroled again. They were there for life.
Correct, and this will modify it so people convicted of a 3rd felony wouldn't be sent away for 25 to life if it's a lower level felony.
And finally, does this settle the court cases over overcrowding and lack of sufficient health care?
We will see. The department has to get the population down to 110,000 by 2013. They'll be close, but they may miss that mark and have to ask the court for a little bit of wiggle room, if you will.
Well, lots of going on there, but not as much as what's going on in just minutes away over at Doyle Drive.
That's right. The fun has already begun. It's going to be a loud, dusty, and noisy weekend for people over alongside Doyle Drive in the Presidio and at Crissy Field. It will be, as someone told me today, it will be the noisiest national park in the country this weekend. Starting at 8 o'clock, Doyle Drive will be demolished. They're going to close it down. They've already closed the marina on-ramps, and it'll disappear after 75 years. It was built along with the Golden Gate Bridge, and for a long time it's been considered too narrow, too seismically fragile, and in need of replacement. And so they're going to start replacing it with the Presidio Parkway, which is a long battled, carefully designed combination of 3 tunnels, 2 bridges. It's scenic. It'll cost $1.1 billion and should be open in about 3 years. About half of it is built already. And starting Monday, people are going to find something entirely different when they approach Doyle Drive.
Well, we can see an animation of what it is going to look like, or is in the process now.
Right, now this portion here is already built. This is a new sort of Y intersection, and this is now, we've shifted. We're heading from the Golden Gate Bridge south. This is along the current Doyle Drive. We're approaching Highway 1 and or Presidio Parkway, which will split off to the right here. And going straight ahead, you're traveling across a new high viaduct that's been built and heading into a tunnel. It's called the Battery Tunnel, and it's one of 3 tunnels that will exist along the way. Heading through the tunnel, you come out onto there's an embankment here, and then you'll head onto a temporary bypass that's being built in the area that's right behind the sports basement and some of the old buildings that are at the Presidio. But so we're just sort of reaching the end here, and then you come out at the Palace of Fine Arts.
I was amazed to see, Michael, when we all remember when that bridge fell down in Minnesota,
right,
whatever, 5 or 6 years ago, and the Department of Transportation has the list where they rank all the bridges in the United States 1 to 100 on how safe they are and how likely they are to collapse. When journalists went and looked up the bridges in California, they saw that Doyle Drive was a 2 out of 100. I guess the worst in the state of California. I had no idea it was that bad.
It was the worst in the state of California and the second worst in the nation. I can't remember what the first was.
Wow.
But it had, as you said, I think it scored a 2 or a 3 on the scale, and the bridge that collapsed in Minnesota was somewhere in the range of the 20s.
So we were very lucky that this didn't fall down already in some earthquake.
Right, and that safety rating does not even consider seismic safety. It's basically road safety. It was the narrow lanes. It was the fact that there's no median, and the type of construction that was used.
And the ever-changing approach of the little yellow markers in the road, so from day to day it could be something different.
Yeah, I mean, even for people who drive it daily, it could be a terrifying experience.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, I mean, I remember reading that this was identified as a problem going back to the 50s or even further. I mean, why? It's beautiful to look at this animation, but why did it take so long? I mean, literally decades.
It's sort of a typical Bay Area or California experience, which is, it's a struggle to find the money. You don't just go to one place and they say, oh yeah, here's $1.1 billion. You sort of go hat in hand to all these different agencies and get your members of Congress working on it and round up money. And so it took that, but also, it goes through a national park. It was originally an Army base, so you have to be concerned about that. And then there are people who say, well, I want it to look nice, and we should have a tunnel here, and we should be able to walk from the Presidio over to Crissy Field. Now, all those things are going to happen, but that took years and years of doing it. And the person who designed it apparently came up with the idea for it while sitting on top of the dome at the Palace of Fine Arts.
Well, one thing we know, there'll be changes tonight starting at 8 o'clock. Explain that one. But that's only the beginning. Then this is going to go on through the weekend, and then what are we left with?
Well, we'll have the new alignment, which is a temporary detour or a temporary bypass, which travels on the ground and it heads into the tunnel and then the high viaduct. That's actually only half of the road.
And then we can expect a protest over the weekend from Occupy also?
Well, probably not over the weekend, but they're looking at May 1st, May Day, also my birthday, by the way. But and as that's a sort of a traditional labor protest day, and there is a coalition of unions at the Golden Gate Bridge that are having difficulties negotiating a contract. They've been talking for a year. It's mostly hung up over health care insurance issues, like many contracts are. And they've enlisted the help of Occupy people who are coming out, and there's a question. No one knows if they're going to shut down the bridge or just yell and scream.
Lots of activity down there. Bring a lunch or nice bottle of water so that you can be patient over the weekend.
And your
you're planning to cross the bridge. And finally, a look at the environmental impact multinational companies, many based here in the Bay Area, have in China. Laura Seidel, NPR's digital culture correspondent, has our story.
China, the most populous country in the world with more than 1.3 billion people, is well known as a major manufacturing hub for many Silicon Valley-based high-tech companies. But this great industrial boom has come with a cost. Environmental degradation of air and water quality has led to dangerous health conditions. Hundreds of millions of Chinese people are exposed to polluted air. Many don't have access to safe drinking water, with rivers contaminated by runoff of heavy metals from manufacturing. Some American companies have pressured suppliers to cut costs by ignoring environmental standards. Former investigative journalist Ma Jun has witnessed these problems firsthand. He's been on the front lines bringing these issues into the public eye, most recently through his organization, the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs. By tracking pollution throughout the country, Ma has been able to work with the Chinese government and multinational corporations to clean up their act. I spoke with Ma Jun when he was in town recently to receive a Goldman Environmental Award. I thought a lot of people here may not really understand the scope of the environmental problem that China faces, one which you yourself first discovered as a journalist and then moved on to realize you needed to do something about it. What was it you saw that made you think, I have to do something?
During the 1990s, mid-90s, and I had the chance to travel to different parts of China, what I saw is this massive industrialization going on, but in the meantime our ecosystem is being impacted, and so at that time in the northern part of China many rivers have run dry, including the mighty Yellow River, and in the south there are quite some cities which have crisscrossing rivers and lakes, but people don't have access to sufficient safe drinking water because water got too much contaminated.
And did you realize the potential for a drinking water crisis because you already saw people having trouble getting water? Were you seeing people getting sick?
Yeah, I saw those water sources get so much contaminated, and through research we found it's not just normal pollutants, but also some of the toxics. Some of them can lead to some diseases like cancer, and we actually saw in some regions villages with excessive high rate of certain diseases. I came to the conclusion that the problem, the environmental challenge is so big, and unless we got extensive public participation, we will not be able to solve the problem. But people need to be informed before they can get involved effectively. So we need to give them information.
So you began to collect information, often from companies that were supplying American companies.
Yes, because China is not just manufacturing to meet the rising demand of its own people, but it's also the factory of the world. So while China's export all these cheap products, all the waste got dumped in our own backyards, contaminating the air, the water, the coastal seas and soil and aquifer. I think one negative dynamic is that all these major brands, when they came to China to do all this sourcing, it's always about knocking down the price. So in some way they drive the suppliers to cut corners on environmental standards to try to win their contract, and that's obviously causing a lot of bad impact on the environment and local communities.
Have companies gotten any better? I seem to recall that Apple was particularly bad initially. Are they any better? Are you able to work with them now?
Yeah, for about a year and a half, we would not be able to make any progress. They just simply say we don't disclose, and even with the specific cases of pollution and poisoning. But then over the past half a year, things have changed. They finally approached the NGOs and try to try to communicate on all these issues.
I guess a question probably in a lot of people's minds is, should we feel guilty about our products? Is there something we can do on this side?
Back home, Apple products is also extremely popular. You know, many of my friends, they're also the Apple users. To them, my message is always, you know, that using them is not a problem. You know, we're using IT products every day. You know, not just for the enjoyment of our life, but also for our work. You know, our work is all based on this IT technology. You know, creating this database. You know, doing all this.
You're using it too, right?
Every day. So the issue is not about that. You know, we need to stop using all these devices, but the issue is about we need to recognize there's a downside. There's a big impact caused by the manufacturing of all these products. You know, especially when the life cycle of these products is getting shorter and shorter.
Right.
Yeah. So the impact is getting much larger. So if we care about this issue, then we could make our voice heard. You know, we could express ourselves to those brands. So, you know, to show them, demonstrate to them that as a consumer, I care about this issue. I want the brands to honor their commitment, to not to use polluters as suppliers.
Ma-Jun, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Laura.
And that's all for tonight, and I want to thank all of you for joining us here with great stories tonight. We hope that you'll visit us at kqed.org/thisweek. That's where you can watch complete episodes and segments, and you can subscribe to our newsletter and our podcast, and you can share your thoughts about the program and our stories. I'm Belva Davis. Good night.